During dinner, my mom slipped me a folded note under the table. It said only this: "Pretend you feel sick. Leave now." My stomach dropped. I looked at her, hoping it was some kind of mistake, but she gave me the slightest nod. I felt my chest tighten as I pushed my chair back. 5 minutes later, someone at the table collapsed. If this story already has you hooked, don't forget to subscribe for more gripping real-life stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Emily Lawson. I was 22, home from college for the weekend when this happened. That night, we were gathered at my Uncle Peter's house for what was supposed to be a relaxed family dinner, the kind of evening filled with familiar voices and predictable laughter. My dad, Mark, was in the middle of telling one of his dry jokes, the kind that never quite landed but somehow still got polite laughs. My cousins were laughing louder than necessary, feeding off the noise of the room. Across from me sat my mom, Rebecca, smiling like everyone else, but her eyes were different, sharp, alert. They moved subtly from face to face, scanning the table the way she did whenever something didn't sit right with her. Dinner unfolded normally at first. Glasses clinked together, plates were passed from hand to hand. My uncle went on and on about how long he'd worked on the roast and how it was cooked perfectly. At the far end of the table sat Cynthia, an old family friend who had recently reappeared in my uncle's life. She was overly cheerful, almost forceful in her friendliness, repeatedly urging everyone to try the dish she had brought. She hovered whenever someone served themselves, watching their reactions a little too closely. At the time, it just seemed like she wanted approval, nothing more. Then my mom leaned forward and asked me about my classes, her tone light and conversational, but her eyes stayed locked on mine, unblinking. There was tension in her voice, carefully hidden beneath normalcy. A moment later, her hand disappeared under the table and reappeared near my knee, slipping a folded piece of paper into my palm. I opened it quickly and read the words that made my blood run cold. "Pretend you feel sick. Leave now." I looked up at her, confused and scared, but she gave me a firm, unmistakable nod. Panic swelled in my chest, but I trusted her without hesitation. I pushed my chair back slowly, clutching my stomach as if I were suddenly unwell. Heads turned toward me. I mumbled something about needing air. My mom didn't react. She didn't rush to help or ask questions. She simply held my gaze, silently insisting I do exactly as she said. I had no idea whether she was trying to spare me embarrassment or protect me from something far worse. The moment I stepped into the hallway, the air felt colder, sharper. I leaned against the wall, keeping up the act in case someone was watching, but inside I was shaking. Her note echoed in my mind. No explanation, no context, just urgency. I moved into the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator and the faint clatter of dishes sounding unnaturally loud. My pulse thudded in my ears. I wanted to run back and demand answers, but the look in my mom's eyes stopped me. She wasn't someone who panicked. If she told me to leave, then there was real danger. From the kitchen doorway, I could still hear the muffled sounds of the dinner continuing, forks scraping plates, laughter rising and falling. Everything sounded normal, which somehow made it worse. My thoughts kept circling back to Cynthia, the way she had pushed her dish toward people who hadn't tried it yet, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes. I pulled out my phone and texted my mom, keeping my body hidden from view. "What's going on? Why did you want me to leave?" I waited. No response. My anxiety spiked. I peeked back into the hallway again and saw my dad through the doorway, relaxed, mid-story. My uncle laughed at the right moments. My cousins leaned close to each other, joking. No one else sensed a thing, only my mom. Then my phone buzzed. "Stay out of sight. Trust me." That was all she wrote. My stomach twisted. She wasn't explaining anything. She was doubling down. Cynthia's voice floated into the kitchen, bright and insistent. "Come on, everyone, don't be shy. You have to try it while it's still warm." My skin prickled. I considered running back in and warning everyone, but I remembered my mother's fierce stare. She had pulled me away for a reason. If I went back now, I could ruin whatever she was trying to do. So I stayed put, pacing the kitchen like a trapped animal, flinching at every sound. Then I heard the cough, soft at first. I froze. Another cough followed, harsher. A chair scraped loudly against the floor. Voices overlapped in confusion. Someone asked if everything was okay. Panic surged. I rushed to the edge of the doorway and looked. My cousin Jacob was clutching his chest, his face drained of color as his fork hit the floor. My dad jumped to him, shouting for water. Chaos erupted. Chairs tipped, someone screamed. I started forward, but my mom caught my eye across the room. She didn't speak, she didn't move. She simply shook her head slightly. Stay back. My legs trembled as I forced myself to stop. Cynthia's voice cut through the noise, high and frantic. It must be an allergy. He must be allergic to something in the dish. But her face was tight, her eyes darting too quickly around the table. She didn't look shocked, she looked cornered. My uncle was already on the phone with emergency services, his voice shaking as he tried to explain. My dad knelt beside Jacob, calling his name over and over. In the middle of it all, my mom sat perfectly still, her attention fixed solely on Cynthia. Standing there, my heart pounding, I realized the truth. My mom had known something was wrong with that food. She had pulled me away before I could take a bite, and now, watching my cousin struggle to breathe, I understood the weight of the note she had slipped me. It wasn't just a warning, it was protection. The dining room was pure chaos. Jacob sagged against the table, gasping, while my father tried to hold him upright. Plates shattered. Glasses spilled, voices shouted over one another. Still, my mom didn't move. Her calm was terrifying. My phone buzzed again. Stay put. Do not eat or drink anything. Trust me. That message confirmed it. This wasn't an accident. Someone had done this on purpose, and my mom knew it. I crouched lower in the doorway, watching. Cynthia wrung her hands dramatically, repeating that it had to be an allergy, that she didn't understand what happened. But her eyes kept flicking to the dish she brought, then back to my mother. My mom didn't accuse her, she just watched, waiting. I finally understood. She wasn't reacting, she was observing. She was letting Cynthia expose herself. I typed one last message. "Mom, what do you want me to do?" Her reply came quickly. "Stay quiet. Watch everything. You'll see." So I did. I stayed back, heart breaking for Jacob, trusting that paramedics would arrive soon. Minutes stretched endlessly. His breathing slowed slightly. The room quieted just enough for Cynthia's voice to carry again as she stepped forward, talking too fast, trying too hard. "I've made that dish 100 times before. It never caused anything like this. Maybe he has a rare allergy. Maybe it was something else he ate earlier. It's not my fault." Her voice cracked, but it didn't sound like fear for Jacob. It sounded like fear of being blamed. That distinction was clear as day, and I knew my mother saw it too. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm, almost cold. "Funny," she said, eyes still locked on Cynthia. "You haven't touched a single bite of your own dish tonight." The room went silent. Every head turned toward Cynthia, whose hands froze mid-gesture. For the first time that evening, the smile she had plastered across her face was gone. Her eyes darted from person to person, as if searching for an escape. I could feel my own pulse hammering in my ears. Jacob was still slumped in his chair, his breathing shallow but steadier now as my father held him upright. My uncle, phone still pressed to his ear, looked torn between finishing the call with the dispatcher and demanding answers from Cynthia. The cousins whispered nervously, watching the scene unfold like an audience to a play they didn't understand. Cynthia finally tried to laugh, a brittle sound that fooled no one. "Rebecca, really? You think I poisoned my own dish? That's insane." Her voice shook with forced confidence, but my mother didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on Cynthia and said, "Then prove me wrong. Take a bite." The room erupted with gasps. My uncle's jaw dropped. My father looked at Cynthia sharply. Even I, standing in the kitchen doorway, felt the weight of those words. It was a challenge that cut through all the excuses. If the dish was safe, there was no fear. Cynthia's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, her hands trembling at her sides. I already told you I'm not hungry. I ate before I came. My mom leaned forward slightly, her voice steady but firm. You've pushed that dish on everyone tonight. You insisted over and over that we all try it, and yet you've never touched a single spoonful. That doesn't sound like someone who's proud of their cooking. That sounds like someone who knew exactly what was in it. Cynthia's lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes flicked toward the bowl in the center of the table, the half-empty dish she had carried in with so much fanfare. For a long moment, no one moved. Then my uncle lowered his phone, his voice shaking with rage. "Cynthia, what did you do?" The question seemed to break her. Her hands flew up as if to ward off the accusations. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way," she burst out, her voice rising. The words silenced the room even more effectively than my mother's challenge had. "What do you mean?" my father demanded, his arm tightened protectively around Jacob. Cynthia's eyes brimmed with tears, but there was no softness in her face. It was anger, bitterness that twisted her features. "Do you think your family is perfect? Do you think you can just treat people however you want and expect them to keep smiling? Your brother ruined my life years ago. I lost everything because of him. Tonight was supposed to be justice." My uncle recoiled, his voice cracking. Justice by poisoning my family? By nearly killing my nephew? Her chest heaved, and for the first time, she looked less like the cheerful family friend she pretended to be, and more like a stranger, a dangerous grudge. "I only meant to scare you," she said weakly. "I didn't expect it to be this bad." But no one believed her anymore. The cousins pressed closer to the wall. My father's face hardened with fury, and my mother, still calm and composed, said the words that sealed everything. "You were willing to put every person at this table in danger just to settle a score. You didn't care who got hurt." The wail of sirens grew louder outside, filling the silence that followed. Moments later, paramedics rushed into the room, moving straight to Jacob. Behind them, 2 police officers entered, summoned by the dispatcher when my uncle had described the situation. Everything happened quickly after that. The paramedics worked on stabilizing Jacob, checking his vitals, preparing to rush him to the hospital. The officers questioned everyone briefly, but it didn't take long for eyes to turn towards Cynthia. She was shaking, her excuses falling apart with every passing second. When the officers asked her directly to explain why she hadn't eaten her own food, she broke down completely. "It was just a mistake," she sobbed, her voice high and frantic. "I didn't mean to kill anyone. I only wanted them to suffer a little, to feel what I felt." Her confession was enough. The officers moved swiftly, reading her rights as they led her out of the dining room in handcuffs. The sight of her being taken away left the room in stunned silence. I stepped forward from the kitchen, finally able to move, my legs weak beneath me. My mom turned toward me, her expression softening as she reached out. "Are you all right?" she asked quietly. I nodded, though my throat was tight. "You knew," I whispered. "You saw it before anyone else." She pulled me into her arms, holding me close as the paramedics wheeled Jacob out. "Sometimes you don't need proof to know when something's wrong," she said. "You just listen to your gut, and when it comes to protecting you, I will always trust mine." I clung to her, overwhelmed by everything that had just happened. The dinner that was supposed to be a simple family gathering had turned into something darker than I could have imagined, and as the flashing red and blue lights filled the night outside, I realized how close I had come to sitting at that table when the food was passed around. My mother's note had saved me. Her instincts had saved us all. The hours that followed felt like an endless blur. The flashing red and blue lights from the police cars spilled across my uncle's front yard, while neighbors gathered outside, whispering in shock. Inside, the dining room that had once been filled with laughter and clinking glasses was now a crime scene. Paramedics had already rushed Jacob to the hospital, assuring us he was stable but needed close monitoring. My uncle stood pale and trembling in the corner, replaying every word Cynthia had confessed. I sat quietly on the couch, my mom's arm wrapped around my shoulders. My father paced the hallway, his face hard and unreadable. Every so often he would stop, glance toward the kitchen where the police collected evidence from Cynthia's dish, then mutter under his breath in disbelief. My cousins huddled together, whispering about how close we all had come to eating the poisoned food. The air was thick with fear, relief, and the heavy truth that none of us would ever forget that night. When the officers finally left with the evidence, the house was eerily quiet. My uncle broke down, tears streaming as he whispered, "She was my friend. I trusted her. I never thought—" His voice cracked and he couldn't finish the sentence. Seeing him like that, so broken, so betrayed, made my chest ache. Cynthia hadn't just targeted our family, she had shattered his sense of safety in his own home. Later that night, when most of the family had gone home and only my parents and I remained, I asked my mom the question that had been burning inside me since she slipped me that note. "How did you know?" My voice was small, almost childlike, but I needed the answer. She looked at me, her eyes tired but steady. "Mothers notice things," she said softly. The way she kept pushing her dish, how she didn't eat any herself, how nervous she was every time someone took a bite. Everyone else thought she was just being enthusiastic, but I knew something was wrong. I couldn't explain it in the moment, I just had to act. Her words sank deep into me. I realized then how much of my life had been shaped by her quiet strength, her ability to see what others couldn't. She had saved me with nothing more than a note and a look. It wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to change everything. The next day, when we visited Jacob in the hospital, he managed a weak smile. "Guess I took one for the team," he joked, though his voice was hoarse. But behind his humor, I could see the fear in his eyes. We all could. He had been the one to suffer the most directly, and it would take time for him to feel safe again. For me, the memory of that night became a turning point. I thought back to how close I had been to taking a bite from Cynthia's dish, how casually I might have laughed off my mom's note if I hadn't seen the urgency in her eyes. I thought about how fragile life really is, how quickly an ordinary dinner can become a nightmare. But more than anything, I thought about trust. Trusting my mother saved me. Trusting her instincts, even when I didn't understand them, kept me alive. It taught me that sometimes we don't need all the answers in the moment. Sometimes survival means listening to the people who love us most, even when their warning sounds strange or inconvenient. I also learned something about appearances. Cynthia had come into our home with a smile, acting like a friend. She laughed, she shared stories, she pretended to belong, but underneath she carried bitterness and hatred. That night reminded me that evil doesn't always look like a villain. Sometimes it looks like someone you think you can trust. In the weeks after, my uncle struggled with guilt, blaming himself for inviting her. But my mom reminded him gently, "It's not your fault for showing kindness, it's her fault for abusing it." Those words stuck with me. They helped me understand that we can't live our lives in constant suspicion, but we also can't ignore our instincts when something feels wrong. Looking back now, I see that dinner not only as the night my cousin nearly lost his life, but also as the night my mom showed me just how powerful love and intuition can be. She didn't need evidence or proof, she just knew. And because I trusted her, I'm here to tell the story. That night changed the way I see my mom. She isn't just my mother, she is my protector, my guide, and the reason I walked away safe. If she hadn't acted when she did, I might have been the one on the floor, and that's a lesson I'll carry forever. Sometimes the smallest warnings can make the biggest difference. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to subscribe for more gripping real-life stories and comment below where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your thoughts.